So what I'm going to teach you this morning is a tool that would be like you taking a snapshot of where you are in your life today, the people in your life, the different activities you have in your life, taking a snapshot and putting this all on paper so you have a picture kind of what your life looks like today. And it will show you where the balance in your life is, where the imbalance in your life is, where the relationships that are positive and healthy are, where the ones that aren't healthy. And when you look at this, all of a sudden you have some choice. You can choose to make some changes in your life to be more productive, more successful, more in balance. And balance is something kind of like, I always think of the guys that do the log rolling, the lumberjacks. Balance is something that isn't constant. You know, just when you get your balance, something comes up, the wind changes direction and throws you off. So this is something that you can do continuously. My favorite time to do this is on an airplane, because I'm stuck somewhere for God knows how long, and why not just take a piece of paper out and chart this out and kind of see where I am in my life at this point in time. So I generally tell people do this every 3-4 months. If you really get excited about this, do this with the people that you're close with in your life. If you're a sponsor, do this with your sponsees. Teach your family members how to do this. It's amazing when you have couples do this, how there's similarities and then there's differences. There's an overlap. It's called the intimacy-gram, and it has to do with the closeness of people in your life. And I define intimacy as the closeness you are to someone or someone else. There are 4 major parts of the intimacy-gram, and I like to start first by defining what are the building blocks of intimacy? What are the factors of intimacy? And this started for me years ago. I was doing a men's support group at a community clinic, and my friend was doing a women's support group, and every Monday before our separate groups, we would have dinner together. And we got into an argument one night about men's view of intimacy versus women's view of intimacy. So I said, well, let's just take a quiz tonight in the groups and see if there's a difference. So one list obviously was longer than the others. Everyone's laughing. I hope you realize that the list that was longer was the men's list. The men's list was longer than the women's list. That's really, really shocked us and surprised us. But I think that's a good place to start with this, is to kind of look at what intimacy is, because sometimes we fail to look at some of the factors for intimacy. So let me write a couple numbers on the board here real quick. 20, 21, 22, 23, 20, we'll say 24. Usually I get anywhere between 17 and 30 factors of intimacy. And some of the things that you guys will be shouting out, I group with other things. Some things are very similar, so I pair them together. So let me hear from you. What are some factors that you think of when you think of intimacy? Heard 2. The first thing I heard, second thing was trust. The first thing I heard was communication. I want to thank you for that, because communication, I believe, communication is the most important factor, because you can have all the other factors, but if you can't communicate them, what good are they? And I can't tell you how many times I've done this, and we've got like down to number 21, 22, and no one has said communication yet. Okay? So I thank you. That is first and foremost. Second, I hear trust, honesty. You guys can just shout them out. Respect, boundaries. Well, respect, I think, is respecting people's boundaries. Got love. Touch would be, I put that under affection. Risk. Ooh, I like that. I don't think I've ever had that one come up before. But that's a really good one. Risk. Vulnerability. Yeah. Well, risk. That goes with trust, right? Okay, let me write these down. Vulnerability, empathy, and compassion. So empathy and compassion. Anger. So I said anger. Anger's not. Anger would be more, having the ability to risk maybe. Exposing yourself to be vulnerable. That would be more where that comes in. Because a lot of times, anger actually creates a rift and a separation from intimacy. If you want to push somebody away, you get angry with them. Okay, that puts them away. Okay. Authenticity, yes, thank you. With humor, I put that as shared humor. Because I know people that love to laugh, but they don't think the same things are funny. So shared sense of humor. Being in the moment with that person, very important. Eye contact, yes. Acceptance. Very good. Ooh, I like that. Interdependence. You guys are coming up with some I haven't heard in a while. This list might actually be bigger.
May I
And forgiveness. What are we doing right now with allowing her to catch up? What are we doing? We're being very... Patience. How would we... That's part of communication. What would maybe be separate for that listening would be? How about availability to listen? Somebody's not around to listen because they're just too busy for you. Availability. Sure, safety, security, that kind of all goes with trust, but no, go ahead. 20, safety, security, that's fine. Kindness. Do we have empathy? Okay. You never have too much empathy, sorry. Shared beliefs, yes, thank you. Shared beliefs. Shared values, yes, shared values. And then you said another word, you said the C word. No. I think you said compatibility, didn't you? Compatibility, yes. No, compatibility is important. I know people that have so much in common, and you'd think that they would just get along so well, but they don't have that chemistry for compatibility, and it just doesn't work for them. Okay, well, compatibility, put chemistry next to that then. Yes, Okay, mutuality. Ooh, commitment, absolutely. Absolutely. Willingness, yes. I can think of two big ones that people haven't put up there yet. Openness is, all of these have to do with openness. Closeness, openness, yeah. Just 28, number 20, openness. It's weird, you got communication, but the other two that everybody usually shout at, what was that? We got affection, touch is affection. What's like the ultimate touch? Sex, okay, thanks.
No one was willing to say the F word.
I have to tell you, in the groups that I have, I do a trigger chart group, and one of the triggers is intimacy, physical, sexual, verbal, and emotional. And people sometimes feel really uptight talking about how that's a trigger. But when they can start talking about it and they feel safe enough, that is my funnest group. We laugh so hard in that group because when we laugh about the things that we're afraid of sometimes, we realize that they're really not that significant. And to be able to laugh at that is really a release, you know. So yeah, we can talk about sex. So what kind of goes with sex? Love, thank you, love. We do? No, just leave them separate. They can be separate. They can be together, they can be separate. Okay. What else here? Are we coming towards the end here? Proximity is important. We have availability. Yeah, proximity, I think nowadays with the internet and Skyping and stuff like that, I know some people that are real close to family members that are abroad because of that. We have interdependence. Freedom kind of falls under interdependence because you're able to be your own person. Okay, so let me throw a couple up here that aren't up here yet. We've got shared beliefs, shared values. How about shared goals? Do you want to add shared goals up there? Pardon? Helpful? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yes, if I have patients that want to keep drinking and I want them to be sober, we're not really going to click, right? They're not going to trust me, and I'm not going to trust them. Okay. So we got shared goals. Another one is history. You're doing much better than I am. Thank you. History is if you walked into this convention and you come from a different state and you knew nobody, but walking in, you saw somebody you knew from 5th grade. You know, you have a history together. You're going to feel closer to that person maybe than anybody else in the room here. So that's where history comes in. Curiosity. Interest. That would be interest, yes. Okay, identification, yes, that sounds good. Is attraction up here yet? Okay, well, attraction, very good. Supported. Supportive, okay, supportive. 34, supportive. Okay, let's stop here. God, this is the best list I've ever had. Thank you, guys. Okay, does anybody want to take a picture of this? Now's the time to jump up, take a picture real quick. And while you're taking your picture, I want to ask a couple questions here. So, like I said, these are the building blocks. Anybody here ever play with Legos before? You know, Legos are amazing. I kind of wish I was a kid nowadays because Legos come in so many colors and shapes and you can build so many more super things with it than you could. Oh, I do. I go to the Lego store. That's like one of my addictions. I go to the Lego store, and they've got the little tubs that you can kind of fill for $10 or whatever, and I try to get all the coolest parts. Someday when I retire, I'm going to build like the biggest little amusement park model out of all my friggin' Lego stuff. If you think of these factors like Lego bricks come in different shapes and different sizes and different colors. And when you go into a box of Lego and you open it up, there's a different combination of the colors and the sizes and the shapes. And that's the same thing with each of our relationships. Our relationships all have a different combination of these things. So if you think about your partner, do you have communication with your partner? Do you have trust with your partner? Honesty, respect, boundaries, love, affection, risk, vulnerability, empathy, compassion, eye contact, patience, sex, compatibility, mutuality. Do you have all those with your partner? I know some people can look at that and say no, okay? But if you can say no, and you know which areas are lacking, then all of a sudden you kind of know what's happening with the relationship and maybe how you can do some fine-tuning if you need to. So let's change relationships here. Not your partner, your sponsor. Do you have communication with your sponsor? Trust, honesty, eye contact, compatibility and chemistry, mutuality, openness, sex, shared goals? Okay. Hopefully no. Okay? See? So this is where you can see that you don't have to have all or nothing. A lot of people think this is all or nothing. It's not all or nothing. Think of relationships you have with your children. Which of these, I don't have to label them, but think of which of these you have with your children. And if you have more than one child, you're going to notice that they're going to be different for each of your children. You know, one child you might have more chemistry with. You just click with that person, you have more in common, and you might have another kid that is just a really good kid and you just totally trust him and you never have to worry, okay? Usually we have one that we worry about, right? So this is important to understand this for starters. And a lot of times we try to put people into certain categories where we're trying to make somebody fit all of these when they don't. And this kind of goes back to respect. We have respect on here, don't we? Okay. So a lot of times respecting somebody is also respecting where we don't have certain things in common, where we don't have a closeness. Because sometimes when we try to force things, we push people away. So this is kind of a combination. Anybody have any questions about this? Yes, acceptance is important. Acceptance, I've known people, I had friends growing up who had like a mother who was Mormon and a father who was Jewish. And their relationship worked. They had some type of acceptance, even though their belief system wasn't the same. They didn't have the shared belief system, but they had the shared goals. So it worked for them. They accepted each other. So yes, absolutely, because you're accepting what you have in common, and you're also accepting that it's okay to be different. Like I said, we don't want to have all these things. And the other thing about the box of Legos, too, is the levels. You know, if you can think of the trust Lego, you might have more trust Legos with your relationship with one of your kids than another one of your kids. You might have a lot of trust Legos with your sponsor, but there might be some other people in your meeting that you have just as many trust Legos with. Okay? Something might happen, and all of a sudden you lose half your trust Legos for that person. That happens sometimes. But it's about, like I said, the combination of things. Now, I wish I had some kind of a formula where I could plug all this in, but I don't. So this is something that you're going to have to kind of do on the honor system on your own. So thank you for writing this down. I'm about ready to erase it. Anybody want to take one last picture? Okay, come on up. Come on up. Would I categorize tolerance with acceptance? Probably, as long as we're tolerating without compromising our own integrity. Because a lot of times you have to look at this too with intimacy, with how close we are to our own self. You know, this kind of goes with our spirituality. How close are we to our higher power? You know, do we have communication with our higher power? Do we have communication with ourselves? Do we trust ourselves? Are we honest with ourselves? So I think this is where all of a sudden we're getting into different layers here, where, you know, we might tolerate something from somebody if we are getting our needs met by someone else or through ourselves or our higher power. That makes sense? Okay, that's a good question. Thank you so much. Okay, this is all going to go away now. So these are the building blocks, and now we have a common understanding of what the building blocks are. So I'm going to explain to you in a second how we kind of, on the honor system, tally these up. A lot to erase here, a lot to erase. Very good list. Now, if you could look at different relationships like different boxes of Legos. What I'm asking you is, on a scale of 0 to 100, how many Legos are in the box and what type of Legos? And I think of it in kind of a percent. So 100% would be your box is 100% full of Legos. You have everything on this list that we just came up with at a huge, huge number of all that stuff. And then we can drop down from 100% to 80%, 80% to 60%, 60% to 40%, 20%, and then 0. So the area that I put together here for 80% to 100% of your box of Legos being full with everything, I call this area your true private area. True private. And please stop me if I misspell. Last night I was told instead of having don't talk, I had don't truth. Yes, don't truth. No. It was kind of a Freudian slip. Oh, I'm sorry, I disappointed you. Okay, so true private. And I have to let everyone know, I came up with this model myself. I made this model when I was coming out of college out of a whole bunch of different models. I just felt that each model dealt with one particular thing, like communication or intimacy or social environment. And I wanted to come up with something that had all these levels. So I made this myself. So having made this myself, I sometimes take some poetic licensure with this. So if you don't agree with some of the things I'm saying, that's okay. You can disagree. We can agree to disagree. However, this is my model, so what I say goes. So true private, this is where you'd put somebody that can read your mind. This is where you can put somebody that knows everything there is to know about you. This is where you can put what we call soulmates. And here's where I put my poetic license. I don't believe in soulmates. I think this is something that Hollywood conjured up. And knowing people that have such wonderful, wonderful, wonderful relationships, I think that they are very compatible together and very much in love and have a lot of these factors, but I don't think they're to the point where they can read each other's mind. And I think Hollywood portrays this myth that we find our soulmate and we live happily ever after, and life is completely wonderful. And the reason why we are so hurt and wounded all the time is because every time we think we found the illusion of a soulmate, it's not what we thought it was going to be. Okay? So I know some people have wonderful partners and they believe they found their soulmate, and I'm so happy for them. But in my model, I don't want you to put soulmates up here. This really is where you put your spirituality. Because the highest thing that you can, the closeness that you could have with anything is with your higher power, hopefully. Doesn't mean you have an absolute relationship with intimacy with your higher power, but this is where it would be. So this is where you put your higher power. And because this is spiritual, this is also where you would put your infants. If you think about your relationship when your children were first born, it's kind of a spiritual relationship, the bond you have with your infants. I think this is where we put those who passed. And the easiest way to write it is just dead people. Ancestors, okay, ancestors, but they could also be, close friends, anybody that you've had, because when somebody dies, all of a sudden you carry them in your heart, so all of a sudden you have a spiritual relationship with them. Anybody want to guess 2 other things that we put up here? Yes, our pets. We have spiritual relationships with our pets. And I was just talking with somebody the other day that I kind of think that our dogs and our cats sometimes are like our guardian angels that are put in our life to help us through different periods. Really just are blessings that help us out. So that's a spiritual experience. There's one other thing that we put up in this column. No, we're at the center of all this. You'll see how we fit in the very end. No. This is where we put either our drug of choice or our codependency, our behaviors. I don't know how many cigarette smokers we have in this room, but I know a lot of people that carry their cigarettes real close to their heart. Okay? That's how close they are, the relationship with their cigarettes, the relationship with their alcohol. If you've been in active use before, you know what I mean. Your higher power becomes your drug of choice. You are driven by the closeness with your higher power. Okay? But your higher power, when you're in addiction, is up here. Doesn't mean it stays up here. If you're in recovery, you knock it out. Okay? But while you're in your addiction, this is probably, because it kind of trumps the higher power. This becomes your higher power, and your relationship with your higher power kind of goes away. So that's 80 to 100%. The next level, which is 80 to 60%, is what I call private. And this hopefully is where you put your spouses. Maybe your BBFs, your best friends. Is it BB or BFF? BFF. This is where you put the people that you're absolutely closest to, the people that you have a really nice amount of Legos in your box. The next level, which is 60 to 40%, I call personal. This is where you put your really good friends. You know, your sponsor might be in private, your sponsor might be in personal, depending on the relationship you have with them. 40 to 20% is familiar. This is where you put your everyday friends. Coworkers, yes. Oh, yes. I have a coworker who actually is kind of like a sponsor. She's my accountability partner. And we are extremely close. Hopefully your therapist would be higher. Hopefully. And the interesting thing about, therapists and sometimes with sponsor-sponsee, when we're dealing with certain relationships, we have to accept that sometimes it's not a reciprocal relationship. Sometimes, like with a therapist, you realize that you have to give all this trust and you have to hand over all your Lego bricks to your therapist. And what does your therapist give you? One little tiny brick. Okay, because that's the nature. For a therapist to really help you, we can't give all of our bricks to you because that changes the dynamics of the relationship. And that's where you have to feel really safe with a therapist and to realize that. I had a patient years ago in a residential program that for the first 2 months he was there, he just wanted to know everything about me. And I told him, zip, nothing. He even wrote a paper one time, and I never got to read it, but it was called Ken's Angle. And he was flaunting it in my face because he had to make up who I was because he didn't know who I was. And one day, after going grocery shopping, this was a residential facility, we're in the van on the way back, and I said something to him. I said, how can I really be an effective therapist to you if I'm your best friend? Because as your best friend, you're going to want maybe me to look the other way sometimes. You're going to want me to give you some slack. And I said, I can't do that as a therapist. My primary goal is to help you, and I cannot help you the way you need to be helped if I'm your friend. And all of a sudden, the light bulb went off in his head, and it clicked. And he's like, you're right. I finally feel now that you were there for me, and I totally understand the reason why. Finally understood that reciprocal relationship wasn't reciprocal. Sometimes, not always, we all have our idiosyncrasies. And, sometimes you could have a best friend, and maybe they're dealing with their own issues of fear and abandonment. And they're afraid that if they call you on something, they might be afraid that you're going to reject them. Because remember, we're dealing with everybody else and their insecurities and their ACA issues. I remember as a kid, I saw a film about how an atom worked, and it was a room full of mouse traps with ping pong balls. And they throw one ping pong ball out, and it hits one of the mouse traps, and 2 more go out, and 2 more, and 2 more. Before you know it, you got everything. I think that's how we interact with each other. It's not that we're wounded and we have our own problems, and we're going out in the world, and we're so insecure. We're dealing with everyone else. And you throw all those ping pong balls together, and you got chaos. This is why we have chaos at work. This is why we have road rage. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, and you're pissed at them. Well, they're just as pissed as you, because everything is just magnified. So just remember, a lot of times you're dealing with other people's dysfunction. And it's better if you can do that, to acknowledge that, you can disengage, and you can realize, that's them. They're having a bad day. I don't have to worry about their side of the street. I don't have to wear their jacket. Let them. So I think we get that way, too, with a best friend, to be able to acknowledge that sometimes they're going to love us and they're going to tell us the way they see us. Other times they're going to be afraid. I hear this a lot with marriage. You can be right or you can be happy. Hopefully, sometimes we have that filter, but we ignore it. And we think that they should read our mind, and they think that they should like everything that we like. And that's why we get upset sometimes, because we don't know where we stop and they begin. And that's codependence is at the extreme. But there are certain times when sometimes we just get so comfortable with somebody that we sometimes take nuances about them for granted. That's all. That's all. And your spouses, this is where the ideal place for your spouses are. So just know, this is not where everybody has to put their spouse. If you have a spouse that you're not very close with, you're going through a lot of turmoil and stuff, they're going to be down here lower. So this is where we would like to put people, and they're just examples of the proximity, but a lot of times people bounce back and forth. Children bounce back and forth too. But the thing about children is sometimes children go through stages where they are so close to us, and kind of like the therapist relationship, it's not necessarily reciprocal. They need us more than we need them. They can walk out of the room and it's not a big deal. We walk out of the room and, oh my God, things, horrible. And then all of a sudden they become teenagers and we don't like them very much and our intimacy with them goes way down. Yeah, right. And then in time the pendulum swings and they mature. And then a lot of times too, it's us. We have to accept them for who they've become. I know a lot of parents that they just fail to see that their kids are growing up and they want to keep thinking that they're a little kid and treat them that way. And it's like, no. I mean, even my mother still to this day, nitpicks me for certain things. Every time she comes to visit, she always has like an agenda. Like she wants me to move a couch somewhere. It's not centered in the room right. And she has this agenda. And she nitpicks the whole thing. One year it was pegboard. I mean, it's always something. And I've gotten really good at finding out what it is right off the bat, but you can't turn her off. You can't turn her off. And I said to a friend of mine once, I said, I don't get it. She doesn't see me as an adult. And my friend said, Ken, what are you talking about? You're just a couple years from being a senior citizen, okay? She still doesn't trust my taste in where I put my couch, okay? My acceptance. And I'm an advocate. I can totally do other people's crazy more than I can do my own crazy. As much as I love my mother, sometimes just words like pegboard are like nails on a chalkboard for me, okay? I can go to other people's family, and I don't care how dysfunctional it is. I can sit there and smile and say, I'm glad this isn't my family, but I can do other people's crazy more than I can do my own. I'm sure you guys all can relate to that. So the last level here, 0 to 20%, this is distant. This is maybe your coworkers. This is maybe the person that you pay every time you go get gasoline. This might be people that you see at meetings that you say hello to. Maybe you hold your hands in the circle at the end, but you never really see or talk to them afterwards. You really don't have anything in your box of Legos. And it's not that you don't like these people, it's just that your box of Legos is fairly empty with these people. If you can take this and make like a 3D model and turn it sideways, it's going to look like a pyramid. Because at the bottom, this being the distant, you're probably going to have hundreds of people. When I used to do this in residential, I used to run a program in Orange County for people that had spent most of their lives in prison, on the streets doing prostitution, homeless. These are people that didn't have a lot of people that were healthy in their support. And when they all of a sudden came into a residential program, we were a year-long live-in program that most of the graduates took 18 months to get through. They needed that much time. They came in without any positive relationships. So part of the goal here that we did was we would every 4 months have them do this assignment to show the growth in their relationships. And the way we would start out was before I even taught this, the week before, I would ask them to write a list of every single person they could think of in their life. Could be the people that were at their medical clinic, the people that they used to score drugs from, whoever it was, to make a list of people. And then once they got to this part, they had to plug all the people they knew into this pyramid here. So you could see where people would have like 100 people or 200 people at the bottom, that you know people by names, but you just have the empty box of Legos. And then when you get to your everyday people, you have more. You have fewer of these, but you do have more familiar people than the good friends. And then when you get to your private section, you might only have 3 people that are up in this area. And there's a reason for this being bottom heavy and not top heavy. Anybody want to guess why? There's only 24 hours in a day, right? So this has to do with the energy it takes to maintain these relationships. And I do believe there's some relationships in life that we make that we get so close that we can skip a beat, not see people for years, and pick up where we left off. But the time in between, there's not necessarily intimacy because they're not in our life. We can pick it up. So people might kind of go into like a holding pattern somewhere where they're distant because they're there, but they're not there. And then, these are people that you love so much and you have so much in common that they click. So this can change, but for the most part, it takes a lot of effort and energy to maintain this. So that has to do with the factors of intimacy and the levels of intimacy. Anybody want to take a picture of this before I move on to the next part? Oh yes, another question? Ooh, but that's the Hollywood thing though. That's what we're spoon-fed. Yeah. Well, all of that's intimacy, even distance intimacy. It's just your box of Legos isn't very full. Right, so one person, 100% is an intimate relationship. And if you don't have one person in your life with 100% intimacy, you don't have intimacy. Okay, so do you still believe that? Oh, good, okay. The only thing that I would say different on here, as far as like if you actually put a person in true private, I've met some identical twins that were so freakishly identical that they might be somebody to put up here. I don't know if I have any identical twins in the room or if there are anybody that's going to listen to this recording down the line, but out of all the patients that I've ever worked with, they're probably the ones that I least like working with the most. Because if you're working with one, you're working almost with half a person. I had two in the high school one time that they were seeing me because their father had passed away. And their mother all of a sudden now was acting like a teenager. And both of the twins took on the role of mother. And they hated that in each other. So the exact thing they hated about each other was the thing they were doing to the other person. They also would come to school dressed the same every day. They had the same glasses. They would go to the optometrist at different days, at different times to pick out the glasses. And they'd end up with the same stuff. One would wake up early in the morning to get dressed to go to school before the other so the other wouldn't see what she was wearing. And they'd wear the same thing. It was freakish. And the thing is, it was so hard for them to both heal because they couldn't see in themselves what they were doing to the other person that they didn't like. Okay? And I've worked with a lot of identical twins that when one starts to get better, the other one starts to get worse. They keep the homeostasis. Identical twins are kind of a whole different thing for this model up here. They bring intimacy to a different cosmic level. Did everybody get the picture before I move on? These are the factors, and actually, we'll also say factors and levels, because the levels are very important, as I'm going to talk about in a minute. The next part I'm going to talk about are the different areas that we have in our life. So we talked about the people. Now I'm going to talk about the areas where we plug the people into. And I call the areas in our life, I call them realms. Our realms change with time. And I want you to all think of your life like a pie. You're going to Baker Square or Polly's Pies or Hoff's Hut or one of the restaurants and you're buying a pie. You're buying a whole pie. You're not buying half a pie. You're not buying a pie in a slice. 100% one pie. I ask people, how do you slice your pie? I had a woman years ago who came into my recovery program whose pie had 3 pieces. This is what it looked like. She had her heroin-using friends. She had her methadone clinic, and she was a single parent, and here's where she had her family, her 2 kids. That was her pie. Not very balanced. She comes into recovery. As soon as she comes into recovery, all of a sudden, she's still going to the methadone clinic, but it's this tiny piece of her pie. She's not using drugs anymore, so she has this huge slice. That's the drug treatment program, TX for treatment. And now she's a little bit more available to her kids. So there's some balance here. She was in the program for quite a while. She was a rebel. She actually, after being on methadone for 12 years, reached a point where one of her sons was going to have his first kid, where she basically said, he's not going to trust me if I'm on this stuff, so I need to get off of it. So after 12 years of being on methadone, she got off of it. She still stayed in contact with the clinic, so tiny little slice of pie here. She reached a point where, she added NA, and then she reached a point in her recovery after over a year where she started going to school. And because she had HIV and hepatitis C, she also had a part where she was also taking care of her health. So she had her medical appointments. So you can see the shift here. Well, after she graduated, the treatment part of the program got really small. She kind of stopped going to the methadone clinic. Treatment program got smaller. However, every Thursday night she volunteered to come back and cook dinner for our graduate upper phase group. And twice a year when we went camping to Malibu for a week, she volunteered to come and help out with staff. So an amazing person here. But shortly after leaving the program, in addition to her health concerns, she came down with lupus. So now all of a sudden she has a lot more to worry about with her health. Had to drop out of school because of that. But after I left the agency to get a job at Kaiser, she got a job working for the agency. So you can see how she kind of had a positive flow to her pie. and everything kind of worked out. And this piece actually got a lot bigger because as she started having more grandkids, she became a stay-at-home grandma in addition to her part-time job, and was able to be there for her kids. Okay? And she was able to stay sober. What I want you guys to think about is the different areas that you have in your life if you could slice your pie. And the primary areas that we have a personal slice. If we're introverts, this is going to be bigger than if we're extroverts. Extroverts don't need a lot of downtime to process and decompress. They need very little. Introverts need some time to themselves in the morning to wake up, to get yourself going, maybe at the end of the day. So we all need to have a personal slice. Sometimes we relapse on drugs, alcohol, and codependency when we don't have time to ourselves. The next slice is maybe a spiritual slice. This could be our time to go to church, Bible study, maybe just our time to go for a walk along the beach or do some meditation. Whatever it is for you, we need to have something that reminds us of our connection to other people in the universe. I could go either. This is where I'm going to kind of let you decide where you put it, because sometimes things are overlapping, and I'll kind of explain this in a minute, how they overlap. So personal, spiritual, recreational. Maybe you belong to a bowling league. Maybe you are a mall walker with some friends. Maybe you go to dog park certain times of the day, certain days of the week. Something that's recreational. We need something that's social. This could be a church group too. This is where there's the overlap. So it could be social. Going to ACA, AA. Those are all social events. If you are affiliated with something socially. And then the last one is vocation, education. So if you're in school, if you volunteer, if you go to work, the reality is all of us need a reason to wake up in the morning. We have to have a sense of purpose in life. These areas give us a sense of purpose. If we're using or codependent, we have a sense of purpose, but it's not helping us reach our true potential. Being able to find this really helps us. Sometimes we look at our life, we slice the pie, usually work is a big chunk of it, whatever the slices are, and we realize that we're not being true to ourselves. We're spending too much time doing one thing and not another. When I had patients that relapsed, I would ask them in the next group to draw their pie on the board the day they relapsed. And it was always amazing. You could tell exactly why, looking back, why they relapsed, because you could see which slice was out of balance. I belong to a nonprofit. Actually, I belong to a couple nonprofits, and they're very small slices. You know, maybe even lump them together onto just kind of nonprofit slice. And there are certain times when they require a little bit more energy than other times. I just make sure that they don't cut into things. Sometimes they cut into me getting to work on time in the morning. And when I'm aware of that, I need to be able to just kind of shut off my contact, which is the internet, and basically say, I will deal with this later. You know, let somebody else deal with this, or I will deal with this later, because I have to make sure that this is taken care of too. Well, relapse would be, let's say somebody is working, and they're under a lot of stress with work, and their job is asking more from them, where they have to put more time in. So as this slice gets bigger, it has to gobble up something. Because like I said, you only have one pie. You don't have any extra pie. Something has to get gobbled up. And, you know, I need to sleep. That's part of my personal time. So if I'm not sleeping, all of a sudden I'm going to be stressed. Okay? So that's a big part of it. But my personal time is very, very, very important to me. Okay? So when that gets gobbled up, I'm in trouble. Another thing is if maybe you're going into your groups and you're sponsoring somebody, and your sponsee is a little bit too needy. Your sponsee is in crisis and is dumping that on you, and you have an ability to really separate, and you're taking on their stuff. I work in a hospital setting, and I know sometimes the doctors, the receptionists, feel stress from the patients, and then they put it on all the rest of us. And I don't work in a crisis clinic where we don't do crisis intervention. But some people come in crisis, and instead of being able to be calm and set the limits and to deal with them appropriately, the staff get all upset. So that's one way that things get off balance. There's one thing that is not a part of this here, and that's you cannot make a person a slice. So if your spouse is a slice, if one of your children is a slice, that is codependent, okay? That is not healthy. When I say you can't do it, I should say I would advise you not to do it. I would invite you not to do it. I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do, and I know some people actually do make one person a slice, but that's codependent. If you live at home with one person, let's say that's your spouse wouldn't be the slice. Home would be the slice. You might only have one person in your home slice, but it's the slice that's your home. It's not the slice that's the person. That make sense? Okay. Because sometimes we do just the opposite. We fail to realize that this is an area of our life, and we just put one person in. Well, yes, you're saying that your slices are enmeshed because you work from home and your husband works from home? Yes. So I can see that. And this goes back to what I was talking about last night, like with the Pennsylvania Dutch. I can think of a family that I know where they have their own greenhouse business. And they have a couple houses on the property, so their kids have grown up, gotten married. They live in the houses on the property. Their grandchildren live there. It's a family-owned business, so everything is kind of all together and it's kind of meshed up. But they're able to keep balance with all of it. And I think that's the key, is being able to keep things simple. What we do sometimes in our life is we put too much on our plate and have too many expectations for ourselves. So all these shoulds get in the way, that we should be doing this, should be doing that. And if you guys are in harmony with each other and aren't stepping over each other, then it works. I think how it works with the Pennsylvania Dutch community is everybody has a role that they play, and they're very comfortable in their role. And I know I get criticized a lot because in the Pennsylvania Dutch community, the women are pretty much the ones that are responsible for every day putting the food on the table while the guys are out in the field. And I know some people say that's sexist. Well, in this community, they cherish their roles. They really like it. And with my family, with the greenhouse, the patriarch of the family, when he was about 80, 81 years old, he had both knees replaced. So he wasn't able to get out and go walking around in the greenhouses to do his job every day. So his wife, who was usually the one that would do all the cooking and cleaning in the house, she went out and took his place, and he took her place. So they were very fluid. It wasn't like it's degrading to step outside of your role, because it's a system based on collaboration, not competition. You know, think of our families. Think of our kids that have the sibling rivalry. Sibling rivalry because they're competing with each other. They're not collaborating as a team. So, within your home, maybe you have all this overlapping, but maybe there's a lot of teamwork that allows it to be successful. Okay. If you're fighting against each other, then you guys need to maybe add a couple more slices to put the balance back in place. But if it's balanced the way it's working, if it works for you, it works for you. What works for me might not work for the rest of you. It's very, very individualized. Any other questions about this? Yes. So how do we get to a judgment-free zone? I'm going to kind of talk about that once we pull it all together. But let me just say, one of the things I teach is when we think of judgments, I know a lot of times we see in the news, we see this white little furry harbor seal being bludgeoned to death, and it's all bloody, and we have an emotional reaction to that because we think it's wrong. But the society that's doing that, the society rules are different. The society rules say this is what we do. And, it's kind of who's to say who's right or who's wrong. I know that a lot of us have no problem going to McDonald's and ordering a Big Mac. Yet I know places in this world where the cow is sacred. That's their higher power. And we're eating somebody else's higher power. What do they think of us? So a lot of times we have to step out of our own judgment and not necessarily think of things in terms of right or wrong, but to just accept things and then accept things what's right or wrong for ourselves. Because I know a lot of times we accept things for ourselves only because it's been what's been told to us. I was in France a couple months ago, and we were in the Louvre, and I said, we need to go see the Mona Lisa. It's going to be so packed there. Everybody's going to go see the Mona Lisa. And my friend says to me, "What's so big about the Mona Lisa anyway?" I said, "Don't you get it? From the time we're a kid, we are told it's the picture, it's the painting, it's the biggest, most wonderful painting on earth. We're spoon-fed that. That's why we go see it, because we're told that it's this wonderful thing. If anybody's been to the Louvre, there's way more wonderful things in the Louvre than the Mona Lisa. It's the size of this, turn this sideways, it's probably smaller than this dry erase board. And so she's smiling. There's other paintings that smile. But that's our belief system. We are told in our culture it's this wonderful, mysterious painting. So that's where we kind of have to remove judgment. I saw it because it's kind of like the Valhalla of paintings. But I realized there were other paintings I liked better. you know. And I spent more time around those paintings and admiring them, and then, you know, reading more about them afterwards and taking pictures of it and making my own decision versus kind of just being spoon-fed. Let me move on to the next part here. We're going to marry the factors and levels of intimacy with the realms. And somebody said earlier about, you know, where are we in this? Well, we are at the very center. So we're going to make this a little bit more two-dimensional now. So here's we. I'll just put me here. The next level, think of like rings in a pond. This would be your true private. Your next circle is your private. And you have personal, you have familiar, and you have distant. So when you draw it like a circle, now you can slice your pie. So with this circle here, maybe this is all work. Maybe for me, this would be my nonprofit, the people that I affiliate and associate with there and the time that I do it with. This might be my kayaking group, my spiritual, and then maybe my home. Oh, and there's another slice that I kind of add. I call it friends and family. It's a catch-all. You know, let's say we go to high school and all of a sudden we have this big, huge realm called high school. And that realm is filled with people. And then we go on to college and we kind of get past those people. But maybe we have one or two friends that we stay in contact with. We don't go to college with, but they're lifelong friends. We keep them forever. They don't really fit into any of our current categories, so this is the catch-all where we kind of just keep adding people, friends and family. Home slice, personal slice. So I'm going to invite you later on your own to try to do this on your own. I got some handouts here. Yes? There's nobody in my personal slice, except maybe my spirituality.
Okay, so then what you have is, okay.
Right, so what I want to ask you guys to do on your own is I want you now to start plugging people in. And this is where there's overlap. You know, you might have somebody, you might go to church with your spouse, you might go bowling with your spouse. So, you know, is your spouse in your home slice, your spiritual slice, what slice? So you put them in the slice that fits the most. Okay? There is overlap. So what I want you to do then is, your coworkers, start putting, the names of your coworkers down here. Steve, Karen, Bob, Jill, Judy, to try to be specific and actually write names down. So when you're done, you're going to have all these slices, and you're going to have labels. These X's represent names, and I really want you to put the names in for everything. And like with your children, you might have, at this present time in your life, you might be closer to one of your kids than with another one of your kids. And a mistake sometimes people do is they forget about all the different colors of Lego, and all they think about is the love Lego. This is not a lovegram. It's not how much you love somebody. Because you might love your kids equally, but you still might feel closer to one at one point than another. So you put everybody where they need to be. So you're plugging this in. So now all of a sudden, you see how the snapshot of what your life looks like is starting to kind of pop out at you? It's really amazing. And I've had it work both ways before, where people think their life is in balance, and once they realize they do this, they realize they're really at a deficit. And it's worked the opposite, where some people have done this, and they wake up and they say, I'm always worried about keeping up with the Joneses, but I have it pretty good. I'm really not wanting anything other than what society is telling me, that I need to run out and see the Mona Lisa. Remove the judgment, you realize you're happy. The next two things I'm going to talk about are not quite as detailed as this. We really, like I said, have to start out by defining what intimacy is. So that's why we spend a lot of time on this. And then going to the realms, understanding the different slices that we have. Sometimes we get stressed out because we have too many slices in our life. We're spread too thin. You can only have 100%. And that's where we get in trouble a lot too. So you guys want to take some pictures, but if you want to wait a minute, I will do with the third thing. Anchors. Anchors are the people in our life that give us a sense of grounding. You think of a boat Think of a boat off the shore of Catalina and a storm comes up and it seeks a harbor, but it's still bouncing around. It throws an anchor to keep it grounded, keep it in place. We have people in our life that ground us, that keep us in place. They don't necessarily have to be our soulmate. They don't have to be somebody who's really close to us. I remember years ago I used to ride my bike to work, and on the way into work I would stop at this really great donut store and I would get my little 50-cent donut, and there was a little woman behind the counter that would always be there to take my money. And if she wasn't there, my day was off. Okay? I know where I work, people have a favorite receptionist they like to check in with. If that receptionist is not there, it changes their day. Because those people are anchors. Anchors give us consistency and structure and keep us grounded. So the third part of this, once you plug in all the people, the third part of this is to circle who your anchors are. So you know who they are. Maybe it's your sponsor, maybe it's the greeter at a meeting, but to be able to circle who they are. You know, we might not have a lot, but to acknowledge who they are. So if we're not feeling right during the day, to ask ourselves, are we missing our anchor somehow? Because maybe our life is going really well, but because we missed our anchor that we're feeling a little bit off sort. But it doesn't mean our life is doom and gloom or we're depressed or something happened. It just means that the person that we appreciate being there for us, for whatever reason, even if it's just take your money when you get the donut, isn't there for you. When you see this, we'll add the fourth part here, which I call ghost relationships. This is kind of the ACA component. These are the people in our life that are maybe toxic. Maybe these are the relatives that are no longer even around, but they still hover in the back of our minds. These are the people that when you get pulled over in traffic because you accidentally cut somebody off and somebody's enraged and comes by you and yells at you and honks the horn and gives you the bird, and all of a sudden you feel like this innocent little kid getting abused again because that person actually reminds you of your father, your mother, somebody that did something to you. We actually have to add those people in here. Let me use a different color. Maybe these are still people that are in our life, but the relationships that create us from having healthy relationships in the moment, in the here and now. And then once you see this is kind of the final product. Once you see this is where choice comes in. This is where you can look at this. Let me grab another color. Let me grab red. And you can say, you know what? I've got this person that I hang out at work with, and they're very negative. They really talk a lot about the process is not working right, and they're very whiny, and I tend to lose focus at work because I listen to what this person has to say, and it's not helping me any. I need to take this person and bump them out a notch or something. Or, Steve has a lot to offer. Steve's a really great guy, and I just never really spend much time talking to Steve. Maybe I need to move him a little bit closer in here. And maybe there's people in my family that I just need to, put out in the outer limits here. I know this happens a lot over the holidays, and I have a lot of people that relapse over the holidays because, the interesting thing about the holidays, especially the codependency group is empty over the holidays because people are too busy running around trying to take care of everyone else. The one time they need to be in therapy, they don't come to therapy. And they relapse because there's so much codependency with drinking and drugging too. People tell me, we have Christmas at my house every year and there's drinking. How am I going to tell my family we can't have drinking this year? How am I to tell them I can't be there this year? They feel so loyal to their family that they sacrifice their recovery and put themselves back in, as opposed to being healthy enough to say, you know what, I can't do that this year. This year I need to go to the Alano Club, and there's a marathon meeting, and they're serving a big dinner there, and that's where I need to be this year. My family this year in my early recovery needs to be with that family. And to be okay with that. So often we're concerned about criticism. Well, the criticism's all this negativity that we want to get rid of anyway, right? So go on, bring it on, criticize me. It just makes me want to push you farther away. If we're healthy. If we're not healthy, we buy into it, we feel guilty, we relapse, we binge, we become extra codependent. That's why we lose so many people over the holidays. But this gives you a roadmap. With the people I worked with in residential, the people that had no friends, Every 3 months they had to do this. So this is 4 times a year. And I made a game out of it. I said, you don't have any quality people in your life. So I want you every few months to target a few people that you can move in closer. And if you can move one person into your inner circles every few months, in the next year, you're going to have 4 really good friends. And it was amazing to see people that had no self-esteem, did not know how to have intimate relationships. And like I said, I dealt with a lot of prostitution. And they did not really know what intimacy was. And teaching them this, they were able to, in some ways, reclaim their innocence and become truly intimate with the people in their life and have really healthy, meaningful relationships and stay clean and sober because they got rid of the junk. So does this answer the question kind of about the toxic relationships in our life and how they affect us and influence us? Question. Do you feel better this year? Do you feel... See, that's the healing process. And healing sometimes hurts, but you heal. What you're doing is you're taking down that false mask, the false self, and being your true self, and you're being okay with your true self. And you're saying, if you want to like me, who I am, then come on in. But I'm not going to put this mask up and be something else for you. So congratulations. That's what recovery is about. Thank you for sharing that. I deal with patients sometimes who have parents that are, they have Alzheimer's or they're ill, and they're nasty. The key with that is we're loyal. Maybe we're the only kid that's available to take care of them. You hope someday somebody does that to you. You hope someday you're not that nasty when it's your turn. But the bottom line is, if you do sign up for that, and you do acknowledge it's a one-way relationship, you're just kind of a doormat with this person every time you're there. You can't do anything right. My reframe with that is, I hope I'm never that miserable. Put me out of my misery if I'm ever that miserable, because I would never want to be that person. I feel bad for that person. I have compassion for that person. But what keeps you healthy in this instance is to make sure that you keep the balance. I know people that have very stressful jobs, but when their jobs are done, they leave at the end of the day, and they have a wonderful life that they come home to. They have the balance to offset it. So if you are a caregiver or you have toxic relationships that you just can't get away from, you need to lessen their importance, lessen the realm, and put the balance in place so that you have balance. In my profession, I've known so many people that get burned out because they're taking on so many other people's pain and emotion, and they don't have the tools to put the balance in their life. So they get burned out. They get very bitter. They change their professions, and some of them are very good therapists, but they're burned out. I think the key of burnout is keeping the balance. When I go on vacation, I play hard, and I come back to work, and maybe I've ridden my bike over the Rockies, maybe I've done something, maybe I've gone kayaking in the Everglades, I've done something really, really, really physical. And I come back and I'm tired. And my patients look at me and they say, wow, you must have had a wonderful vacation. You came back so relaxed. And I tell them, I didn't come back relaxed. My job is sitting all day long. I come to work to relax. I'm relaxing now because I really wore myself out in a good way when I was on vacation. That's the balance. That's basically it, understanding the levels and the factors that make intimacy, plugging them into the different realms we have. Sometimes when you do this, you might even identify that you're in a realm that doesn't even work for you anymore. Get rid of the realm. Chuck it, okay? Add something else. Maybe you have been on a hamster wheel for so many years that you think that you can only have a life a certain way. Maybe you need to take on a new hobby, a new interest. But that's the whole log rolling thing, is our life changes. I got really into cycling for years and years and years and years, and I had some changes in my life, and I realized that I wasn't cycling anymore, and I needed to get back to that. And then I realized the reason I wasn't cycling more is because I picked up kayaking. You can only have 100% of your pie. And once I realized that, I wasn't upset about not biking, because I realized, I have the best of both worlds. I've got five bicycles in my garage, and between the beach and my house, I've got 5 kayaks. I have a lot of gratitude. I'm really grateful that I can have that. And the reason why I have so many is not just because they're specialty, but because all the people in my life, I like to invite them to go with me so that I don't have to do this alone. That's the other way that I keep the balance and keep the intimacy in my life. So this is a roadmap for you. I would really encourage you guys, and I'll ask you guys to to maybe pass this from table to table. This is an intimacy gram. It's pre-sliced. If you don't like my slices, make your own. You don't have to use this piece of paper. Write your own piece of paper and, put the slices. You might have more slices. You might have fewer. Something might be bigger. But that's just an example. In the middle, you see kind of a weird face. Yeah, that's the date. The weird face is to put the date in here. So, is today the 1st? Wow. 2015 is going by rather quickly. So you'd put 3/1/15 here. And it's interesting, if you keep these and do these periodically, to look over and see how your life has changed. Like this woman up here, how wonderful to be able to see the growth and the healing from here. Okay. So that's basically it. Any questions? Yes, very much so. And, intimacy, the levels change then because, kind of what one of the other speakers said about Maslow's hierarchy of your needs. Towards the end of your life, your needs really change. You're not really trying to be self-actualized if you're just trying to catch your next breath. So your intimacy changes, and just having somebody there to take care of you to make sure that you're comfortable is everything. So yeah, in the beginning stages of life and end stages, it's going to look a lot different than this. Sometimes we have such passion about our relationships that we really want people to fit into a certain slice or a certain level that don't fit. And this is kind of where our codependency comes into place. And it's too much effort. If we can just accept this is as close as we can get with this person. When I studied for my state license, back in the day, we had to take an oral exam, and I got a test packet that had like 20 sample oral exams, and the oral exam was the same. I think it was 17 questions, 12 or 17 questions. It was always the same questions. The vignette was different, but the questions were the same. I asked a lot of my friends who were very much in my inner circles, who maybe I worked with, to help me out with this. I didn't ask my kayaking friends. I didn't want to put them on the spot. They're kayaking friends. They're not intellectual MFT friends. So I didn't want to plug them into a different area and then all of a sudden be upset with them for not helping me out. I was really encouraged when a couple of them had heard me talk to other people about this and volunteer to say, hey, I really want to help you with this. To me, they felt that much closer because of that. A lot of times you know who your friends are if you're moving. Who helps you out. And I know there's certain friends that I would never ask to help out move because they're just not that close. I would never ask them. But other people I know that would be offended if I didn't ask them. So that's kind of understanding and being at acceptance where people are in your life and not trying to make them be something they're not if they're not capable. Because remember, you're not just dealing with your box of Legos, you're dealing with their box of Legos. And your Legos might not mix together well. The ghost relationship are the relationships of people that are really no longer in our life that still have influence over us. So if somebody abused you years ago and they had a beard and a mustache, and you get creeped out by people with beards and mustaches or tattoos or something, you're not being in the moment. You are reacting to somebody else who's no longer in your life. And if you can identify that, then maybe you can catch yourself as those feelings are coming up and saying, wait a minute, that person's not here, they can't hurt me anymore. I have no idea who this person is. I do not need to transfer my ghost relationship onto this person. I need to be in the moment, in the here and now. Okay? That's the ghost. How do you explain to somebody that you're trying to bump into an outer realm? I think it depends on the person. It's kind of one of those, I don't know if you need to make amends with that person at all before you move on or what, but, sometimes there's a casual way out where it's just, I'm sorry, I've just been really busy. My life is taking a different focus right now. This kind of goes back to the love Lego. You're my cousin, I love you dearly, but just right now, my life is going somewhere else. And that's the thing with this. It's an ebb and flow. And think about this with your spouse, with your kids. There's times in your life when you're really close, and then people kind of drift apart. Your kids go off to college. Maybe they get married and live out of state. And then all of a sudden they start having grandkids. And because of the grandkids, now all of a sudden you kind of get closer to them again. So life has an ebb and flow. So just to acknowledge that and communicate as best you can, if they can understand it. If they can't understand it, then, you might have to hit the ignore button. I don't know. Every situation is different, but whatever works best for you. Just the fact that you can acknowledge it, I think, is where the healing starts. Well, I have no idea about the time, but this is basically the whole presentation. So thank you for allowing me to teach this again. Go home and do this. Take a picture. So if you did not get the handout, the most important thing is take a picture of this so you can get the concept so you can do it on your own. The handout's not the most important thing. The fact that you can take the picture. I did this at work a few months ago, and somebody actually did digitize this for me, so I can look that up, and maybe I can have them put this on the website. So if you weren't able to get the handout, you can maybe pull this off the website. So thank you very much. Thank you for having me here. Enjoy the rest of your day.